My name is John Meehan. I bought in a sword that I know nothing about. I got it from a friend of my wife's, and she tells me that it's been in her house well over 50 years. She's as curious as I am as to what it's all about and where it came from.
Swashbuckling pirates dueling with rapiers, gallant knights clashing with broadswords, acrobatic ninjas defying gravity with katanas. Swords occupy a romantic place in popular culture. Prior to the advent of firearms, swords were the weapon of choice for militaries for millennia. The oldest known examples discovered in Turkey date back more than 5,000 years. Stone Age knives were short in length because stone is brittle. With the discovery of bronze, cutting edges became longer and the sword was born. Today, military swords are primarily used for ceremonial dress. Although they're now brandished more often in movies than actual conflict, the allure of a sleek, glinting blade lives on.
Well, we're here today with John Meehan, and John has graciously brought in a wonderful example of a British sword. I was wondering, John, if you could tell us what you know about the background of this sword.
I actually know very little about it. A friend of ours said, well, I've got an old sword that's been behind the couch in my house for well over 50 years. And then she says, I don't know where it came from, who had it, or anything. She said, I'd love to find out about it.
Okay.
So that was it.
So here we are.
Here we are, yeah.
So this is a nice example of a 1796 pattern British Army officer sword. So these swords are issued from 96 till about 1822 to British officers. So it's like the height of the Napoleonic-Era, if you would. The blade style here is called a spadrone. So this type of sword can be used to thrust and cut. Okay. It has a single fuller that runs up the length of the blade, and it tapers at the point, almost like a spear tip point, they call that. We see the bluing and this wonderful etching or engraving that's again backfilled or infilled with a glaze. The bluing and the gilding that you see there, that's done as an application after the sword blade's made and before it's hafted. So when it was just a blade, it would have been engraved, and then it would have had the bluing would have been done on it in a chemical bath, and then you would have had that gold leaf finish go on top. This has what's known as a Adams or an urn-like pommel. This is a wooden sort of grip. You can see the indentations here. This would originally have been covered with metal wire. It's really interesting here too. These leaves that you see, these are called acranthus leaves. This is an ancient sort of symbolism going back to the time of the Greeks, where the acranthus leaf represents immortality, regeneration, etc. The guard on this is called a scallop style or a kidney-shaped guard, and it has one side that can move down like this, so when the sword is being carried in its leather scabbard, it doesn't bang against the owner. It hasn't seen like a whole lot of use, but the bluing is in not bad shape, especially for a sword that's been kept under a couch for, decades.
I'm curious as to what was going on when this sword was sort of first used in the late 1800s.
When this sword is first issued in 1796 and throughout the Napoleonic-Era and the long series of wars that'll be conducted between Napoleonic France and Great Britain and its allies, this is the beginning of what you might recall the Regency period. Yeah. So the Regency period is known for a certain grandeur in terms of like clothing and furniture. This is reflected again here in an officer class sword. In 1793, the French Revolution is reaching its zenith in terms of the deposing and eventual murder of King Louis and the royal family and the peerage of France, or Great Britain, Russia, Portugal, Austria, etc. These countries will become allies and will fight the armies of Napoleonic France. So for over 20 years, the world is engulfed in this huge global war. Halifax being a garrison town and a naval station for the headquarters, the dry dock for the North Atlantic Squadron. That's a big part of our history. The time of Napoleon, his long wars on land and at sea, it reshapes the world.
How would this sword have actually got to where it is in Nova Scotia?
These are issued to officers who are serving in British North America as like militia officers. The other aspect is following the end of the Napoleonic era, a lot of officers of the British Army are given land grants in North America. So this long presence of the British Army, their soldiers coming back here, living in North America, has an enormous effect on the development of the country as well.
Evan, I brought my own Royal Naval Officer's sword in, and I'm curious if you could do a comparison of this sword, which was a ceremonial sword, to that sword which I brought in.
Certainly. Now, if we look at this sword next to the 1796 pattern, we can see some vestiges of the patterns that emerged in the early Victorian or even pre-Victorian era. And this is a stainless steel blade. Like here, we can see some nice engraving. This handle here is probably shark skin. It's to give your hand a good grip on the blade, so if at any time your hands would become sweaty or you have blood on your hands, you're going to be able to grip that sword. Right. We have here the symbol of the Royal Navy, and again, Royal Canadian naval officers today and right up until the First World War, everybody was expected to have a sword as part of your kit. But by the time you've received your sword, these things have become more ceremonial in nature. John, I was just wondering, does your friend and your neighbor, does she have any plans for this sword?
She's going to be very, very overawed by the history you've given me about that sword. And knowing her, she probably will donate it.
Oh.
I can't think of any reason she'll put it back behind the sofa for another 50 years.
It's always remarkable to see the things that are hanging around, like in this case, under couches or in corners.
I was absolutely amazed that that sword dates back to the late 1700s. I just had no idea.